Thank you guys for coming today, and I'm just going to start with some thank yous. So if I forget, I can say them a little bit later. And huge thank you, Vanessa and Noah, who have they're so amazing. This program they've put together, they've not only created an incredible space for us, the artists here, but I really think this is actually going to impact the world of art and tech and culture in a very big way. And I think we'll be seeing that coming up. Also, the shop staff, and you guys, you're going to find this very hard to believe, but what I'm worst at, what I hate the most, what I try to never do is ask for help. And I've had to do that all the time here. And I know you guys are busy, and I'm still chasing you down, but so just thank you for being so wonderful. I think the other day I was talking to Josh and Martin, I referred to the table saw as that wood thing. And I wish I had a shot of Martin's face. Josh took it pretty well. He was just like, oh, I think I better be there. And, and so that was a trick I should have started doing much sooner. So instead of having to ask for help, that's what my neighbor Tom's here. And I never ask him for help. I just go outside with my own cordless drill until he can't take it anymore. And he comes out with his bigger drill. So, thank you guys. And thanks to Joy and to Chloe for keeping things running. And the Instructables people, you guys are so creative and so amazing and so much fun to be around. So that too has been great. And then the other AiRs, so there's collaborating and there's asking for help, and sometimes they overlapped, but they are always really, really a great experience. So thank you guys. I have been very much out of my comfort zone here in the tech world, and so I'm going to take you guys into my comfort zone a little bit and talk about the project. And I also thank you guys for all coming in the kitchen and being such enthusiastic eaters. Christy and Eric have, they're just awesome foodies, and they've put together this kitchen that's just incredible. And I'm not sure how I'm going to live without a sous vide from now on. It's going to be hard. So they've been really, really incredible, and I feel like Christy's been a collaborator as well throughout this program. So this is my program, sort of ongoing program about how to harvest and prepare foods from around the San Francisco Bay. So I'm going to give you a little background, my background, and tell you sort of how this began. So I am a writer. I am not a chef. I have no background in food. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, where our main staple was Jell-O salad. It was also a creative outlet. It was also considered a salad. Everything we ate there was kind of bound together with cream and mushroom soup. Yeah, casserole. And so I started working at a Mediterranean restaurant as a waitress during college, and that's where I started learning about food. And all kinds of food, and especially seafood. I had never had fresh salmon before. I'd only had little fish sticks at St. Elizabeth's on Fridays. Raw oysters, seafood fettuccine, swordfish came in. I mean, there was all sorts of incredible seafood. There was this big world out there that I learned about. I don't know if anybody here has been a waitress, but it gets very stressful. So sometimes I'd kind of freak out on the kitchen. And so to sort of teach me patience, they would pull me in the kitchen and make me cook for a week or so, which I always really liked. You just made more money on the floor. So those cooking skills did come in handy. And it was mostly line work, like chopping, salad girl, that kind of stuff. But I decided I wanted to travel around the world and be a writer, particularly Latin America, but I had no money. And there's tips, you just spend them. So I decided to go to Alaska, work in a cannery, make a whole bunch of money, and then travel. So I didn't think this through particularly well. And I arrived there, I knew nobody, I had $150, and nobody was fishing yet. So there's no work in the canneries. So, but I could cook, and I was a female. So, and that's me in the orange outfit. And let me tell you something, you don't want to look good on boats. You just don't. But they still figure out there's a woman under all that. I don't know how they do that. But so I worked on my first fishing boat for kind of a pervert. I was the cook. And I had to jump off on a foreign port, and I worked 2 hours in a cannery, and then I figured out you made $6 an hour. I just threw my gloves down the chute and walked out during coffee break. So I went back to Homer, and I eventually got a job working for a skipper. She was 27, a woman. She wanted an all-female crew. She wanted girl talk out there on the boat. And I'm like, I don't know if that was quoting Simone de Beauvoir. We're talking about dudes, but I'm game either way. So I ended up working for her. And the thing with fishing in Alaska, I don't know if you've seen Deadliest Catch. That's like Bering Sea crab boats. Salmon boats were pretty close to shore. It's not that dangerous. The only time anything goes on is when you travel. So if you have to travel to a new area to fish, we had this place called Gore Point. It just, you always knew something was going to screw up at Gore Point because the waves would get so bad. And I heard about your guys' ill-fated trip to the Farallones, right? So so that's pretty much Gore Point. Well, Gore Point is probably a little worse. So like things like if we had any water in our diesel fuel, it would choke the boat, kill it. We'd become sideways to the waves. So we're all like trying to change our fuel filter, trying to keep the boat in the waves. And I really thought I was going to die on several occasions in Alaska. And that's the thing about seasickness you learn very quickly. It's a luxury. Because if you think you're going to die, you're not seasick. You're just doing what you have to do. So then this is, but then afterwards you'd be in this calm, flat water, and all of a sudden there's porpoises surrounding you, and they might be covered with phosphorescence, and it's so beautiful you can't believe it, and you just are sort of like, maybe I did die. So that sort of was the Alaska fishing experience. It was extreme terror, beauty, and then being tired a lot of the time. I also worked for the Department of Fish and Game out in western Alaska, monitoring salmon runs. So I did that for the summers. I worked 2 years on the Yukon Delta, which I ran set net sites. And we would catch fish, and then we'd kind of have to give them away to the Yupik people who had fish drying camps along the river. So I made friends with a couple of them, Angie and Isabel, who both were amazing. And they really showed me how they broke down salmon, how they smoked it, what they did with all the parts. And they used every part. And they'd save the eggs for the winter, to keep you warm. But they used to take the milt from the salmon, put it on a stick, the male salmon, put it on a stick, dip it in seal oil, and eat it like popsicles. Which, at the time, I wasn't like, wow, why isn't everybody eating salmon sperm popsicles? It was more, I was just like, ladies, that is a protein-rich treat you got going on there. But this was something that, like, to them, there's no difference between the fish, the salmon, their food. It was just all one thing. And their word for food, nika, is synonymous with salmon. So that's what, so our idea of like, oh, that's gross, it has eyes. Oh, well, that fish has bones in it. It's like, what? Yeah, it's a fish. So anyway, so after some time in Alaska, quite a bit, I went to graduate school in New York City for writing. And I worked summers in Alaska, and I was in New York City in the winter. And there was this, in New York is an amazing place, but I also felt very alienated a lot of the times. And a lot of it was a lack of nature. And a few times I tried to get out of town and go on a hike, I just ended up walking on some highway in Westchester, and somebody would like throw their lemon icy at me or something out their car window. So I just stopped doing that. And I started writing about the ways that nature gets translated in the city. There's this amazing book called The Experience of Landscape by Jay Appleyard, and he talks about kind of our atavistic, primitive relationship with nature, that it influences everything we do, even if we don't know it's influencing us. So our idea of beauty comes from that. Our idea of harmony and dissonance in sound comes from that. And we're constantly translating this in our architecture, in the gardens we plant, particularly, though, in the food we eat, right? So people might lose their language in one generation, but they'll keep the food for many generations. So these foods we crave, that we like, that we want, oftentimes that's because they're somewhere back. That's where it came from. So I kind of sought out things like this. I did a documentary piece on the final days of the Fulton Street Fish Market. Black Cowboys of Brooklyn, who are awesome. Ben Miller, that's not Ben, he was 91, and we recorded his life on radio on audio, just because, the whole history of the West and civil rights could be written through his life. This is a gardening program at Rikers Island, which is really great. The people who are involved in that have a far lower recidivism rate. This is Mistress Ginger. She did not know how to take care of her tomato plants, so I offered to help her if she'd let me write about her. And she kept getting phone calls from guys while she's doing that. She's a dominatrix, and she'd be like, yeah, all right, bitch, get on your knees. So this happened like 5 times, and I'm like, I know who should be helping you with your tomato plants. Those guys are like getting on their knees so much. And then this is pigeon mumblers in Brooklyn, and this is old Italian guys go on their roof, and it's like marbles, right? So they're up there in the air, and they try to take each other's pigeons away. So I wanted to be back out west. And I went to visit a friend. A couple of different girlfriends of mine from Alaska live on boats in Sausalito. So one of them said, I'm going to be out of town for 2 weeks. Why don't you come out and visit? And at the end of 2 weeks, I was like, this is where I'm living. I went back, packed my bags, everything. There were seals swimming around, pelicans landing. I was on a hike one day, and somebody said, oh, yeah, I saw a mountain lion here. And I'm looking right at San Francisco, and you could be eaten by a mountain lion. I'm like, this is where I want to live. And so I moved onto a houseboat in Sausalito. and which is also really this amazingly different way to live. We live by the tides. You know, you have to wear boots if it's high tide. One of my neighbors one time during a king tide, there was jellyfish going across the path. You know, he had over there. And so I've started, you know, kind of writing more and more about ocean issues, sustainability, seafood, and really with, you know, when you want to write about environmental issues and that kind of thing, oftentimes it's very, very hard to sell, right? People don't want to hear about the 5% biomass and 14% biomass and bycatch and IFQs, like they don't want to hear about it. They do want to hear about a new caviar that's on the market, ways you can prepare herring, what's the best oysters to eat. So I might slip in something about ocean acidification with that one, or, you know, how forage fish are being reduced with this one. This is, you know, good versus bad caviar. That was scuba diving, so where you can scuba dive to help sharks, right? So kind of taking this environmental message and making it into lifestyle. Now, Ocean Conservancy hired me to go give a talk at Chefs Collaborative on diversity, how people helping chefs create more diversity in their seafood. So while I was preparing this talk, I called it Eat Like an Animal. It was different ways we can learn from nature on how to eat. One of them is responding to abundance. Another one is diversity. So I was talking to some biologists, and who are kind of trying to, very progressively, trying to move us into ecosystem-based fisheries. So Dr. Charles Fowler was a sea lion expert for the stellar sea lions in the Bering Sea, which are being drastically reduced because of the pollock fishery up there. They keep saying, oh, the pollock's sustainable, we're going to keep fishing. Well, they're taking 2.6 billion pounds a year out of that ocean. It's not only impacting the stellar sea lions, but also the Yupik people who live along there, the ones I worked with on the Yukon Delta. So what he's trying to do is to say that don't just count one species, look at the whole ecosystem, all right? Let's connect to the whole ecosystem. And he's also saying that we have been trying to impose our structures onto nature, and we have to stop doing that. We have to enter into the complexity of nature as opposed to trying to make nature fit our ideas of laws, technology, economics particularly. So this, when you're kind of thinking about it, you're like, okay, well, how do you turn that into a story? How do you let people, you know about this? Well, one thing that's happening in California it's a West Coast fisheries management. They're the most progressive. So as far as that goes, they're the only place that's doing that in the United States. So they're kind of setting this example, and hopefully, if it works well, then it'll be an example for the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And the one place that has been successfully implemented so far is the San Francisco Bay. There's a herring fishery here. Only 4% are allowed to be taken, and they're only allowed to be taken after the needs of all the predators have been accounted for. So water birds, sea lions, seals, they all come first. And then they let the fishermen fish. Unfortunately, the fish are still mostly going to Japan for the roe, and their bodies are wasted, even though it's an amazingly healthy, great food. But that's because it's our default. We don't eat it. We eat shrimp, tuna, farm salmon. That's mostly what we eat. And most of it is imported from other countries. 91% of what we eat seafood-wise is from other countries. Most of that is farmed. Most of that is coming from China. But this is where we live, right? So if there's anything people in San Francisco like to do, it's eat. So instead of saying, okay, I have 4% biomass, 14% biomass, it's like, hey, let's eat, right? And not just eat, but what are ways that we can really engage with the world around us so that you fall in love with it? So it's not just food, but it's your coastline, it's your bay, you're really engaging with it and enter into that complexity, that unknown that Dr. Fowler was talking about. And so this has been, a lot of my instructables here have been how to do that, right? So this is harvesting seaweed on the Sonoma coast at sunrise. It's catching a salmon at Duxbury Reef. Here, Vanessa and I went out and drank wine and harvested mussels out of Marin. And this one here is right off the pier, catching crab over there. We couldn't keep that guy. The other ones, I think our crab catching here, we decided we termed that barely legal. And then Charlie had the idea of making gumbo so we could stretch our 5 crabs as far as we possibly could. But even just that, even just symbolically, making your own salt, a little bit of seaweed, catching 1 fish a year, you're engaging with the world around you, the natural world around you, and that makes you a steward of it. And that means every time you take a bite of that food, you use that salt, you also remember that incredible morning that you were out on the Sonoma coast. And so the connection continues to that. So I put a lot of these up as instructables, and I get great comments of like, oh yeah, I used to do that as a kid. Oh yeah, we have that kind of seaweed here. And so people get excited about it because it's also really fun. You know, it's just something we always think we're too busy. And I have a wonderful neighbor, Court, who's always calling me on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. And I'm like, I don't want to, too much to do. And then I'm out there, I'm like, what was I thinking? This is amazing. So then we started, we'd made stuff in the kitchen, and we tried to do things that they're a little bit different than maybe what people are used to. So this is seaweed pasta. This is our crab from Pier 9. These are oyster mushrooms that Vanessa and I grew with sea bass that I caught, or striped bass that I caught. Those are anchovies, and Christy is the fastest anchovy cleaner I've ever seen in my life. That's what I wish I had a video of. That's what we need to do an Instructable of. I've never seen anything quite like that. So my friend Martin Reed came in, and he has actually just founded a nonprofit where they are selling sort of the good parts of the fish, the sashimi. All the trim is going to nonprofits so that it's not wasted, and people in the area are getting healthy food. So we broke down a whole salmon in the kitchen. A lot of you guys were there. And then we used all the different parts, except we kind of saved the fillets. I put those in the freezer. But we made dishes out of the tails and the bellies and the bones and the head. And you guys, I think a lot of you guys were there and ate it, and it was pretty great, right? Which is normally what gets thrown away. So this is another kind of thing that was going on with my project. This idea of ecosystems is we waste tremendous amounts of food. This idea that everybody's plate should have a giant piece of protein and like a little piece of green thing next to it is like, we can't do that, So this is just ways of, and then the recipes are all up in the Instructables so people can find it. This was super fun. That Instructable photo and everything, thanks to Rob over here. He helped with that. But actually, in Sustainable Seafood World, sushi is the biggest offender. I think when they did a test of seafood that's been mislabeled, it's 78% for sushi restaurants, 38% in general, 78% in sushi restaurants. That's where you get your farmed salmon. Bluefin tuna is being wiped out because of it. Ranched eel. I'm like the worst person in the world to go to a sushi restaurant with. I'm like, oh, you're going to put that in your mouth? You know where that came from? But I love sushi, and I do go to Tataki here in the city. But this, so we had a sushi chef came in to give a workshop with all of us, or he's a friend and a colleague from the industry, came in and gave a workshop with all of us. And so what all of this is food caught from the bay and the coastline. So it's all San Francisco sushi. It's all wonderful. It's kind of harder than it looks. You can tell by this top one. That was done by one of the artists in residence here in the workshop. That was not done by the sushi chef. And then the other thing I learned by talking to him, he worked in a restaurant in LA, not here, or not in Japan, in LA for 4 years before they allowed him to cut the fish. And then the way he talked about it and the parts of the fish he used and what he used them for, I just realized in this sort of hour and a half workshop, I was like, I know nothing about seafood. And that was actually super exciting. So here's the salmon leather lamp. So we saved the salmon leather from some of the salmon that I caught. And Jennifer Berry is kind of a professional animal skinner and tanner, believe it or not. And so this is from Jennifer's Instructable for how she made it. So Jennifer, we looked it up, and it can't be a grown man. It has to be either a woman or a young boy's urine. We don't know why exactly. And then Jennifer was like, I can do it. She brought it in on the ferry. There was like a big sort of fashion design workshop going on over there, and I'm photographing Jennifer pouring it in with the salmon. But then everybody would be like, where is it? We're like, just don't worry, it's hidden. So had a little sign on it. So this was, so we did that. And then Eric, well, this was the one before it. He's gone, but he was here. Eric Foreman helped turn it into lamps. So there's some up here, but be very gentle with the skin, please. And then there's another fish there. We could even do it with other fish. This is the whole pig. And this was sort of, Christy was getting a pig in, and she's like, you want to help? And I'm like, sure. And then Noah's like, well, you want your own pig? And I'm like, of course. So we got another half a pig, and so I'd never done this before, and this is a different way of doing it. We use paring knives, and I don't know some of the people who helped us out, but there was, after the whole thing was said and done, there was like a bowl this big of waste that didn't get used. And that included these little hairy teats that Rob had the excellent suggestion we should dip in resin and sell on Etsy. And then this is sort of all the wonderfulness that came from our pig. We had bacon, we had lard, we had tamales. These are banh mi sandwiches. And then we were making sausage, and a bunch of artists in residence came in, like Meredith and Kobe, and this is what ended up happening. We just started making a bunch of balloons out of the sausages. Another thing I am really into is actually gardening, and foraging on land. So I'm into land foraging too. So this was, so mushrooms are a big thing. That's another book of mine, and it's about how to, for gardening for people in urban spaces or small spaces. And since I live on a houseboat, that's sort of, I'm very limited. So that's why foraging is so awesome. So it's been wild mushroom season here. So that's been great. And these are candy caps and pine tips. I made some sausage out of those too. But then my friend Becky Sellinget, who's a chef and an author, was coming through town on book tour. So she stopped by the kitchen and we made some of her recipes out of her book. And then, and let's see. And then, so I don't know where this came from, but it was like, we were talking about kitchen gardens and inside gardens. I was like, I want a wall-hanging mushroom garden. And I'm sure if I had done it, it would have been like a birdhouse, like a box with a hole in it. But then Vanessa gets involved. so we ended up, we were on the water jet. We've got over here, we're sandblasting them. We're putting our mycelium in. And there's a great Vimeo that she shot watching these guys grow. So those are edible mushrooms that you could put in your kitchen. And we did eat them late one night. Yes, they were good. So this is, and so this, Iris Gottlieb, I don't know if she's here today, she did all of the illustrations, and she did such a good job. I'm just like so in awe of her and what she did, and so grateful. And then Jennifer Berry really put this all together, spent a lot of time doing the graphics and making it look nice. And so this basically is a map of the project I just told you about. So you can see sort of what the species are, where you can find them, what the seasons are, how to go about it. And then you go to my Instructables, link is over there. And then these are just little fun facts or little information about them. So yeah, so these are all available. And like I said, even if you just do it once, twice a year, go drop the crab pot with Noah and Charlie, and and it's just super fun.